Alright, and welcome back to the Nepo versus Ding match recaps. This is the game number 8. Featured a very interesting Nimzo type of the opening, and then we see a very unusual, straightforward kingside attack by Ding. And thanks to this unusual opening idea, he managed to get a very dangerous attack, which netted him winning advantage. Then he ran into the time trouble, and Nepo defended very creatively. Nepo managed to swindle Ding into not taking the strongest decision, which resulted in a draw with some very creative defensive play by Nepo. But okay, one step at a time, let's go to the very beginning of the game. We see the Nimzo. Traditionally, Nimzo is a very double-edged opening, and the idea is for black to double white pawns on the c file here. White actually invites black to take on c3, otherwise the whole point of this opening is gone. And we see this pawn structure, which is very, very standard. So there are two ways to play this structure for black. One is the way they play it in the game. He plays d6, and the other way is to play c5, b6, knight c6, bishop a6, going after this pawn immediately, but not playing d6 because you want this pawn to protect this pawn, and black plays knight e8, followed by f5, trying to stymie white's expansion in the center and attack on the king side, which leads to very complicated positions, also very strategic. It's very hard to say they're dynamic. There is a lot of play by minor pieces. But the pawn structure is very rigid. In this game, we see Nepo try to go for this plan, but sort of he is mixing things up because he wants to keep an option of playing e5. Here we see knight e2, kind of unusual. Usually white plays knight e2 before playing a3. So knight e2, a3, forcing black bishop to go back, which follows by the further development of this knight, traditionally to g3, but sometimes maybe to f4. The idea of developing knight to g3 is to help white with the pawn moving f3, e4, grabbing the rest of the center. But again, this is a development that kind of more usual in system where black plays d5 and where white doesn't really have the possibility to grab e4. On the other hand, this knight definitely looks more logical than being developed to f3, because if you develop the knight to f3, then you have to move the knight to d2 in order to push these pawns, and the knight on d2 doesn't really stand well. He hinders the development of the white pieces, and etc, etc. So knight e2, c5, and knight g3. Both sides are completing their standard developments. Black plays knight c6, but now white plays rook a2. A slightly mysterious move, but as we will see in a lot of lines later in the middle game, especially if white plays e4, f3, and then possibly g4, the rook can easily swing over to the king side. Except that, which means that white king will have to be stuck in the center if he wants to attack on the king side. So rook a2 is a signal that white really wants to go for an attack here, and there is not much black can do. He has to do what he does best. He has to lock the center, attack the pawn on c4, and watch out for white's attacking possibilities like e4. So b6 is played, standard, e4, and bishop a6. The engine suggests taking on d4 first. As we will see, it is very interesting idea, because after this trade, the center will be way more open than in the game, and black rooks will actually have a chance to infiltrate and counterattack white king, especially given the fact that white king stays in the center in this game. So very interesting idea to take on d4 first. But again, usually black doesn't take on d4 because canonically you don't want to undouble these double pawns, right? So bishop a6. But after bishop g5, and you have to play h6 because the threat is knight h5 to use the pin and open black king's defense. So h6 must be played, and h4 is absolutely forced. So black takes on g5 again, otherwise there is knight h5 coming, there is attack coming, potentially even f4 from the Sicilian rouser sort of structure. So take, and g6, again taking on t4 is very interesting, but g6 is very standard, solid, and it looks like black is okay here. Yeah, I mean, if black has one more tempo to play, he will play e5, and king is easily protected. Black, this bishop is very closed, and white is stuck weaknesses. However, it is white to move, and he has this very nice pawn break. e5, which is probably home prepared, because if you play this line, a lot of these moves are forced. So black doesn't have much choice. He has to take this pawn on e5. Because if you play stuff like queen g7, white can play queen f3 attacking the knight, and then knight is unstoppable to reaching f6 square. So taking on e5 is forced. And now, it seems very reasonable for white to play knight e4. Same idea, right? Queen goes to f3, and you want the knight on f6, and it looks like black has to play queen f4. But it is possible, and black is actually better at the end. So this is why d5 has been played in the game. Again, it's all been analyzed, pretty forced. So looking some lines here, knight e7 is possible, but I was like trying to understand why black cannot take on d5 and sort of trying to get this bishop into the game. So the line looks, the line that seems very logical is the following line. You take on d5, take on f1, because the bishop wants to take on g2, you have to take the bishop. White has undoubled the pawns effectively, so even if black just sleeps with his knight to e7, you can play c4, knight e4, white has full compensation, so the only way to play for black is to play knight a5, and to make sure these pawns are disconnected, so you can attack this pawn and try to win it. But again, it's white to move, and there are several moves he can play. Most logical move is queen g4, and the idea is black plays queen f4, trying to create the check threat and forcing this queen to move. And after queen h3, king g7, queen h7, check, very likely, rook h4, check, king e2. We have very curious position, but it seems it's very unclear because both kings are in the center, queens are deeply infiltrated. But again, king e7, knight e4, and white has possibility to play queen g7, f6. He has possibility to play d6, rook d2, also sometimes rook h1. This game is extremely complex, and I will not be surprised that after serious analysis turns out that this is equal. All right, so this is possible. Black can also play here queen g7, which seems to be logical and probably a better alternative for black. You just protect your king, then you play f5. This rook is nowhere near close to getting to the double pawn position here, and black successfully, if black successfully manages to play f5, e5, keeps the center closed, then this pawn is falling. Knight is really not having any squares. Black is better. So cd5, taking on d5 looks very logical for me. Instead, Nepo plays knight e7, and now white's initiative really gets going because of this d6, knight f5, knight e4, and white managed to improve his position all with the tempos, especially the critical knight e4. So the idea is now there's going to be a struggle for the control of this f6 square. If white managed to keep the control of the f6 square, he will win this game because of the openness of the black king. Knight on f5 is also on the fringe side of the board, and as we can see, the pawn on c3 now plays pretty critical role here. Imagine if the pawns were traded, the knight would have here unstoppable way to this d4 square, which is another argument for the reason why black should have actually traded the pawn. As the way things are, the knight is cut off, he has no squares, and he will be soon forced to move from this square. So queen d8, logical, because if you play queen g7, there is this extremely nice line g4, bishop b7, trying to counter-attack this knight and make a pin. And the threat is now to take on f5, knight f6, bishop takes b7. Black doesn't have much choice, he has to play f6 because the bishop is now protected. But this doesn't really save the situation because white has this trade, you have taken the rook. Very important intermediate check on d5. You cannot take this bishop, but also you cannot really protect your king, so you have to play king f8. And now white takes this and plays f3. And finally we see the reason for this rook on a2. And rook joins the effect, and the king being moved, there is a huge threat of the rooks infiltrating here. The only defense seems to be queen c6, and now after the check, king g7, take on a8, queen a8, d7. Black is forced to blockade this pawn with the queen, which is the worst defender. The queen is now value completely nullified. It is forced to the pure defensive role of the center. White plays queen d5, and basically this is very close to winning advantage for white. The rook will protect this pawn, and queen will seek ways to infiltrate and remove the last defender or trade it, at the same time creating threats to the black king. So despite material advantage for black, which is minimal, his passivity of the pieces and the strength of this pawn guarantees white a very nearly winning advantage. So that's why black queen moves to d8. We are now entering a very tactical, very dynamic stage of the game. The engine suggests that black can defend with the accurate play, but in a practical game, this is very, very difficult. Queen d3, queen moves to the h3, very logical. King g7 and g4, knight is pushed not only on the side of the board where he'll be attacked, but he also pushed away from the defense of this pawn. Black can win a tempo, which he does by playing bishop b7, using the fact that if you take the knight, again, there is the spin. And now white plays rook h3, removing the pin, and black plays knight h4, which is correct. The idea is that if you take on a4 and take on d6, I think is actually very possible and should have been considered by Nepo, because if you take on a5, f6, first of all, black managed to eliminate this very dangerous knight, and second of all, after queen h2, knight f7, knight guards the critical squares, and there is no way for the white bishop to get to this knight. It is very possible that this position is still pretty equal, especially considering the possibility for this rook to move to try to this file, or there is some f4 movements, rook h7, king g8, and maybe f4 here. And again, the position remains very, very tricky, but I think the worst is behind for black, especially if he finds this f5 move. And again, things are very, very tricky here. Rook g2, queen f6, and black seems to survive. Again, it's not the end. There is queen h3, there's bishop d3. The rook is very, very dangerous, but compared to the game, this position contains less danger. Still, knight h4 has been played. It's a very decent move. You protect the knight, you close the h file, but you have to watch out now for the knight being attacked by playing g5, right? Okay, so g5 has been played, main line. Bishop e4 is a mistake, but it was very hard to see that you had to play rook h8 here and not be scared of this queen g3, because it looks like, you know, after all these trades, this pawn remains. White will be able to pick up the e pawn, and then this d pawn alone will be a huge headache for black, in addition to f3, rook h2 ideas. Black has really not much choice. He has to play bishop f3 here, and then we're probably going to go into this position. And again, openness of this king is way weak. A lot of checks possible, very strong pawn, but, you know, possibility for black to defend this position, and the engine considers this as a draw. Okay, so now Nepo makes a mistake. He takes on e4. Yeah, he plays rook h8. No, rook h8 is wait, g5. Right, he takes on e4, and queen e4, knight f5. Right, that's the game. You gotta play knight f5, and he misses that white is not forced to take on a5. If you take on a5 after f6, queen h2, suddenly there is no mate and black can take on d6. No mate. So what he misses, however, that there is this rook d2 move. And the original idea was undoubtedly for black to take this pawn on g5. However, there is this line which results in the black's immediate surrender. Queen f6, rook h7, queen e5, f6, queen h2. The threat is the mate, and black is forced to play rook h8, but after this temporary pin, a queen sacrifice and d7, there is no stopping of this pawn, and black loses the game. So queen g5 is impossible. Black has to do something, but he can't really do much, so he has to play this move. It's the only move. Rook h8, queen h8, perfect play by Ding, but now he makes an inaccuracy. The engine suggests rook d3 first, forcing black to move his queen from the h file because of the rook h3, queen e5 and queen h2 threat. Instead, d7 is played and allows black to block this pawn with the rook. Okay, with the rook d3, black would not have such a possibility because of the rook h3, queen e5, huge threat. So rook d8 is played, queen e5, king h7. Now they repeat the position because Ding again needs time to make time control. So it's a very old trick. He repeats once more, but he doesn't do the three-time repetition. He plays queen c7, judging correctly that his position is much better due to this very strong pawn, knight on f5 not being able to protect the rook, and suddenly black pawns on the queen side are falling. But now we have the greatest trick in this match by Nepo, and he plays queen h4. Although, if he played correctly queen f8, it's very hard to say if white is so winning. The idea is that if you take on a7, black just plays queen a7, and the pawn is hanging. White needs to do something, so he probably has to take on b6, take on c5, and it looks like white has 5 pawns versus 3 black pawns, so white is 2 pawns up. But after king g8, or even queen d8, f4, and now king h7. And the reason is black is looking to infiltrate. If you play queen b8, immediately you fall for queen e5 check. So you have to play king h7 first. And now if you play queen e5, then queen infiltrates on b6. But if you play a4, then queen b8, and black infiltrates. And with the queen and knight working together, it is very close to equal, actually, despite white advantage of 2 extra pawns. So queen f8 was not a bad move, but the problem is this queen a7. If played so very hasty, then it's clear advantage. Then clearly black has a chance to equalize. However, white can just play queen h3, bishop h3, and trade this knight, leaving himself with a very powerful queen, rook, and pawn. Or he can just play king d1 here. And the idea is that after the king runs to the safety, you can take now these pawns. And this pawn is untouchable unless black wants to bring in the knight. So if he brings in the knight, white brings in the bishop. And the idea is that bishop goes to c6, the pawn is now protected, and finally white can actually just play king b3 and walk the king all the way here, okay, and take this pawn. So there's some absolutely crazy lines like e5, you play f3, g5, king a4, g4, you can take. Now either rook g2 or king b5, and king takes b6. And again, the queen and bishop here completely safeguard king, and now king can just follow this a pawn, or white can play queen d6 and bring the king to c7, which is very close to winning position for white. Okay, so this was one of the ways for white to think about winning this game. So Nepo sees this. He is not a player who is going to sit and wait patiently for his doom to come. And he comes up with this absolutely brilliant bluffing trick, which is queen h4, for which Nepo is very, very famous for. He looks for a tactical solution to the problem, and Ding actually trusts him because he has no time to check the lines. The threat of queen e4 check followed by queen b1 check looks immensely risky to just allow, but it was exactly what's needed to do. But in order to see the correct line, you have to be very, very sharp. Bishop e2 allows repetition of the position, so you have to play rook e2, check, queen b2 check, king d3, and there's only one move to stop the perpetual, that's to play rook c2. Now black has two moves, one of them is queen f1, and after king d2, knight d6, it looks like there is no stopping knight c4 mate. However, white has the only winning move idea, and that is queen h8, check, and you grab the knight because of the check, double attack. So if black doesn't take the bishop on f1, he has to play queen d1 check, and there is only one way again for white to play for a win, and that's king e4. You must walk with your king to the center and not worry about anything. Queen c2, and again the only move is bishop d3. And this is finally winning because white has the trick of queen f6 check, where you recapture this with the check and you queen, make a new queen. And the black plays knight d6, the king goes forward, and again queen f6 check. And it looks like you walk into the lines, then your king should be mated, but the king is not mated, and the king actually is very, very safe, and white wins the game. Again, a very tough line to see so far in advance. It was limited time, so Ding naturally makes a safe move. He plays king d1, but after queen g5, the advantage is almost, the entire advantage is gone. However, we have the time trouble coming, and Nepo is also quite mortal, and he makes some inaccuracies, which allows white to recapture some of the advantage. He plays queen e7, very passive move, which he realized a little bit too late. He actually had to play knight h4 and stop white's bishop from reaching this magical c6 square, where he will protect this pawn and allow white pawns to actually move forward. So queen e7, Ding plays bishop g2, and now again white has an advantage. After e5, bishop e4, this advantage is now extremely large. Black pawns are all not going anywhere. These pawns are falling, followed by the a pawn rolling. So Nepo understands he got into trouble again, and he needs to do something. He finds the plan, which is to put the knight on f6. Ding calmly takes the pawn, but Nepo makes yet another tricky idea. Knight g4. Basically, it looks like you want to play knight f6. Maybe you want to play f5, followed by e4, knight e5. What's the big deal, right? So why don't we attack this knight to stop him from playing f5? And if knight f6, then you play bishop c6, protect everything, and again, white is winning. But Ding misses one thing here. So instead of bishop f3, he should play bishop c6 immediately and try to get the queen back here to c7. Or take on b6 and play bishop b5, following the fact that black cannot take this pawn, thanks to the pin. But after knight d3, there's some tricks for black, but white should be able to win this position because, again, the bishop is powerfully placed, the pawn is protected, and the a pawn is rolling. But in the time trouble, he plays bishop f3, and he misses this very amazing knight takes f2. The point being is, if you take on f2, after e4, you really cannot protect this pawn, because with bishop g4, there's e3 and queen e4 check. White loses the bishop. But if you do something like rook e2, then black can just play f5, and bishop is completely shut off by this pawn chain, his own double pawns on the c file, and the position is equal. Yeah, it's kind of amazing, to be honest, but that's what it is. So rook f2, e4, that's what happens. Rook e2, rook d7, or f5, queen b6, and it's amazing, but this position is equal. Again, thanks to this bishop being locked out, white king being open, and black is very safe behind this pawn phalanx. So he tries queen b8, and I was thinking, why not just, you know, move the bishop out of the harm's way and then try to push the pawn, but there is no way for white to do so without, with his queen getting trapped. The queen has no moves. The queen has 0 moves. The only way to move the queen is by trying to play queen a8 and queen b8, so the queen can move somewhere here. But then white loses the key pawn, which was basically the only hope of winning the game. There is no more a-pass pawn. Again, black king is very safe, bishop is bad, and now the recheck threatening, and potentially g5, g4 coming. So black is not worse at all. It's a pretty shocking thing, but you know, Ding probably realized that that's what's gonna happen, so he plays queen b8, and he goes for the bishop e4, because if he plays bishop g2 again, the same thing, rook a6, the pawn is stopped, black does not allow king a4, b5, and black just plays king f6 and start pushing his own pawns. And unlike white, these pawns are very, very dangerous, and the lone bishop can barely, I don't think he can even stop them. If king gets to e5, pawn gets to g4, and then at some point king f4, e3, f3, black is just winning. So it took a very courageous decision by Ding just to take on a4 and to realize his advantage is gone after having advantage and winning position for the most of the game. And he has to now understand that this game is going to end in a draw, because this rook endgame is absolutely equal. Double pawns, the extra double pawn is meaningless. Black has pass pawn g, which is way more dangerous than the a pawn, and that's why the game is agreed on a draw. Because white is going to attack this pawn, black is going to attack this pawn, and then this g pawn is coming. Eventually there will be a trade, and it's a dead draw. So this was pretty Wild West game where Ding had a lot of chances thanks to his very unorthodox opening play, super sharp attack. But we have to give credit to Nepo's creativity in defense. His huge bluffing skills with the queen h4. Then he played a little bit carelessly, got into trouble again, but then he found this incredible knight f2, e4, f5 positional sacrifice of a minor piece for the purely 2 pawns, but he gets a massive pawn in exchange and gets rid of ultra dangerous white's d7 pawn, which was literally choking black's heavy pieces, denying them of any counterplay. So incredible game by both players, to be honest. I'm very impressed, and stay tuned for the rest of the match, because so far this match looks very exciting. Again, if you like the video, please hit subscribe or like, and I will see you in the next game recap.